Captain Marcus Kane had attended exactly 17 diplomatic functions in his career with the Colonial Defense Corps, and every single one had taught him the same valuable lesson: the universe had a perverse sense of humor when it came to routine negotiations. Standing in the combat arena of the Thalarian trading outpost on Nexus 7, watching several hundred alien warriors place bets on how quickly he was about to die, Marcus reflected that this particular diplomatic function was shaping up to be number 18 in that distinguished tradition. "I feel obligated to point out," he said to his diplomatic aide, Lieutenant Torres, "that when command briefed me on Thalarian cultural customs, they somehow forgot to mention the part about ritual combat." "Actually, sir," Torres replied through the comm, his voice crackling with static from the arena's energy-dampening fields, "it's mentioned in subsection 47 of the Cultural Protocols Manual. Under dispute resolution through honorable violence." Subsection 47, Marcus repeated, adjusting his grip on the energy sword that felt like it weighed approximately as much as a small shuttle. "Of course it is. And remind me again how we got from requesting docking permissions to preparing to be ceremonially dismembered?" "You accidentally implied that war leader Swyxera fights like a human female, sir." Marcus paused in his weapon calibration. "I said she was tactically brilliant and moved with impressive grace. How does that translate to insulting her combat prowess?" "Apparently, sir, suggesting that a Thalarian warrior resembles humans in any way is considered deeply offensive. Particularly when you use the phrase, fights like, in reference to their combat techniques." "Right," Marcus said, watching as the arena's energy barriers hummed to life around the combat circle. "So my attempt at complimenting a respected alien military leader has resulted in a formal challenge to mortal combat. This is why I became a soldier instead of a diplomat." The crowd of Thalarian spectators filled the arena's terraced seating, their pointed ears twitching with anticipation as they watched the human warrior prepare for what everyone seemed to assume would be a very brief and educational demonstration of superior alien combat techniques. Marcus caught fragments of conversation in the Thalarian language, his universal translator helpfully informing him that the betting was running approximately 40-1 against his survival. "At least they think I'll last long enough for interesting odds," he muttered. War leader Swyxera entered the arena from the opposite side, moving with the fluid grace that had gotten Marcus into this predicament in the first place. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her lean frame encased in ceremonial combat armor that seemed to be crafted from crystallized starlight. Her weapon, an energy blade that hummed with contained plasma, looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star and handed down through generations of warriors who had never encountered the concept of mercy. "Captain Kane," she called across the arena, her voice carrying clearly despite the crowd's excited chatter. "Do you withdraw your challenge to my honor?" "I wasn't aware I'd issued one," Marcus replied, though he was beginning to understand that Thalarian concepts of honor operated according to rules that made quantum physics seem straightforward. "But no, I don't withdraw." This declaration sent ripples of surprise through the crowd. Apparently, most humans had the good sense to apologize and back down when faced with ritual combat against 7-foot-tall alien warriors. Marcus was beginning to suspect this said something unflattering about his judgment. Swyxera's luminous eyes fixed on him with what might have been approval. "You understand the terms. Combat continues until one yields, becomes incapacitated, or dies." "Understood," Marcus said, though he was privately hoping that yields would turn out to be a viable option before things progressed to the other alternatives. The arena's combat coordinator, an elderly Thalarian whose scars suggested he'd survived more battles than most species had words for, raised his hand to signal the beginning of the duel. "Let honor be served through strength, skill, and courage," he intoned in the formal cadence of ancient ritual. "Begin." Swyxera moved like lightning given form, her blade carving through the air in patterns that seemed to bend space around them. Marcus barely managed to deflect her opening strike, the impact sending vibrations through his arms that suggested his weapon was approximately as effective as a decorative letter opener against a particle cannon. "She's fast," he reported through his comm, ducking under a horizontal slash that would have separated his head from his shoulders with surgical precision. "Yes, sir," Torres replied helpfully. Thalarian warriors train from childhood in combat techniques that emphasize speed, precision, and what the cultural files describe as elegant lethality. Elegant lethality, Marcus repeated, parrying a thrust that created sparks bright enough to serve as emergency lighting. Why does that not surprise me? The duel continued with Marcus doing his best impression of someone who knew what he was doing while Sci-Fi demonstrated why the Thalarian clans had never lost a war in recorded history. Her movements were poetry written in violence, each strike flowing seamlessly into the next with the kind of perfection that came from decades of practice and genetic advantages that human evolution had simply never prioritized. Marcus, meanwhile, was discovering that his military training, excellent for human conflicts involving projectile weapons and tactical coordination, was somewhat less applicable to single combat against alien warriors who moved like they'd been choreographed by someone with a PhD in applied physics and a minor in interpretive dance. "Sir," Torres's voice carried increasing concern, "your vital signs are suggesting that this engagement is not proceeding in your favor." "Really?" Marcus gasped, rolling away from a strike that left a molten scar in the arena floor. "What gave you that impression?" Despite the overwhelming disparity in their abilities, Marcus found himself oddly impressed by Sci-Fi's technique. She wasn't simply trying to kill him as quickly as possible, she was demonstrating the full range of Thalarian combat artistry, each movement calculated to showcase not just her lethal efficiency but the cultural beauty inherent in their warrior traditions. She's not fighting to win, he realized, barely managing to deflect another strike. She's fighting to teach. This revelation came simultaneously with his recognition that his defense was failing. Sci-Fi's blade slipped past his guard, the energy field singing as it traced a line across his chest that sent him stumbling backward. His own weapon clattered across the arena floor as he fell to his knees, combat armor smoking from the precise strike that had defeated him without causing permanent injury. The arena fell silent as Sci-Fi stood over him, her blade raised for what everyone expected would be the traditional killing blow that concluded Thalarian honor duels. Marcus looked up at her, expecting to see triumph or contempt, but instead found something in her luminous eyes that he couldn't quite identify. She held the position for a long moment, weapon poised, while the crowd waited for the inevitable conclusion. Then, with movements that seemed to surprise her as much as everyone else, Sci-Fi reversed her grip on the ancient blade and offered him the hilt. "Now you belong to me, human," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent arena. The silence that followed Sci-Fi's declaration lasted approximately 3 seconds before the arena erupted into chaos. Thalarian voices rose in a cacophony of surprise, outrage, and what Marcus's universal translator helpfully identified as expressions of profound cultural confusion. "Sir," Lieutenant Torres's voice crackled through the calm with barely controlled panic, "I think you should know that accepting her weapon appears to have triggered some kind of cultural protocol that isn't covered in any of our diplomatic manuals." Marcus stared at the offered blade, its ancient metal inscribed with symbols that seemed to shift and flow like living things. The weapon hummed with contained energy, and he could feel heat radiating from its crystalline core despite the ceremonial nature of the gesture. "What exactly does, 'you belong to me,' mean in Thalarian culture?" he asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would require significant revision of his mission parameters. "I'm checking the linguistic databases now, sir," Torres replied, and Marcus could hear frantic keyboard activity in the background. The phrase translates roughly to, "Oh. Oh, that's not good." "Torres." "Sir, according to the cultural files, she's just claimed you as her bonded mate. In Thalarian society, presenting your personal weapon to a defeated opponent creates a life bond that supersedes all other social obligations." Marcus felt his eyebrows climb toward his hairline. "She's done what now?" Around them, Thalarian elders were arguing in voices that carried the kind of authority that came from centuries of making decisions that affected entire star systems. The younger warriors seemed split between amazement and amusement, while the crowd's betting pools had apparently collapsed entirely in the face of unprecedented cultural disruption. "The precedent files are sparse," Torres continued, his voice growing increasingly strained. "The last time a Thalarian warrior claimed an alien mate was approximately 400 years ago, and that ended with the formation of 3 new clan alliances and a religious schism that lasted for decades. Wonderful, Marcus said, still staring at the weapon Swaxera held toward him. And if I don't accept? According to the cultural protocols, refusing a blade bond offer is considered an insult so profound that it typically results in immediate execution of the offending party, followed by a blood feud between their respective peoples that can last for generations. Marcus looked up at Swaxera, whose luminous eyes held an expression he was beginning to recognize as determined patience mixed with what might have been nervousness. Her pointed ears twitched slightly as she maintained the formal offering position, waiting for his response while the crowd's arguments grew increasingly heated around them. "Captain," she said, her voice cutting through the noise with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, "you fought with honor despite your inferior training. Your tactics showed creativity I have never encountered in traditional combat forms." "Thank you," Marcus replied, though he suspected this was leading somewhere that wouldn't be covered in standard diplomatic response protocols. "Among my people, a warrior who demonstrates unexpected innovation in battle is considered valuable," Swaxera continued, her formal tone carrying undertones that his translator was struggling to parse. "Your species' approach to combat lacks our precision, but possesses adaptability that could benefit our clan structures." "So this is a tactical recruitment?" Marcus asked, beginning to understand that Thalarian concepts of romance apparently involve detailed analysis of combat effectiveness. "Partially," Swaxera admitted, though something in her expression suggested the full explanation was more complex. "Your combat records indicate you have survived 17 major engagements against superior forces through the use of what your reports describe as creative problem-solving and tactical improvisation." Marcus blinked. "You've read my service records?" "I have been monitoring human military activities for several months," she replied with the casual tone of someone discussing routine intelligence gathering. "Your approach to warfare is intriguing. Where Thalarian warriors rely on perfected techniques passed down through generations, humans adapt and innovate in ways that make them unpredictable opponents. And this interests you because..." "Because," Swaxera said, her ears twitching in what Marcus was learning to recognize as a sign of emotional intensity, "I have never encountered a warrior whose tactical thinking complemented my own abilities in such fascinating ways." The crowd's arguments had organized themselves into what appeared to be formal debate, with elder voices rising and falling in patterns that suggested they were consulting ancient precedents and legal frameworks. Marcus caught fragments of translation that included phrases like unprecedented alliance, genetic diversification, and potential violation of 17 sacred traditions. "Sir," Torres's voice carried notes of professional fascination mixed with personal concern, "the political implications of this situation are extensive. If you accept the Blade Bond, you'll technically become a citizen of the Thalarian clans with full voting rights in their council systems. And if I refuse?" Based on the current tone of the crowd discussion, refusal would likely result in immediate armed conflict between our diplomatic mission and approximately 300 heavily armed alien warriors. Marcus looked at the blade again, its inscribed surface reflecting the arena's lights and patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. The weapon was beautiful in ways that transcended mere aesthetics. It was clearly the product of centuries of technological refinement and cultural significance. "What's the blade's name?" he asked Swaxera, surprising himself with the question. "Stormbreaker," she replied, and for the first time since the duel began, her formal composure cracked slightly. "It has been carried by the leaders of my bloodline for 17 generations. By offering it to you, I am..." She paused, searching for words in a language that wasn't her own, "sharing my ancestral honor." "That's a significant gesture," Marcus said, though he was beginning to realize that significant was a massive understatement. "It is irreversible," Swaxera confirmed. "Once you accept Stormbreaker, we are bound until death or dishonor separates us. Your victories become my victories, your failures become my responsibility, and your survival becomes my primary concern." Marcus felt the weight of the decision settling around him like gravity from a planetary mass. Accepting the blade would fundamentally alter not just his own life, but potentially the relationship between humanity and the Thalarian clans. Refusing it would likely result in his immediate death and the collapse of diplomatic relations that had taken years to establish. "There's one thing I need to know," he said, looking directly into Swaixera's luminous eyes. "Is this purely political? A strategic alliance disguised as cultural bonding?" Swaixera's ears flattened against her head in what Marcus's cultural briefings had mentioned was a sign of emotional vulnerability. "When I watched recordings of your combat performance," she said quietly, "I was impressed by your tactical innovation. When I observed your behavior during diplomatic functions, I was intrigued by your ability to find humor in stressful situations. When I fought you today..." She paused, her formal composure wavering. "I discovered that you fight not for glory or dominance, but to protect others. That is, rare among warriors." Marcus reached out and grasped the hilt of Stormbreaker, feeling ancient metal warm beneath his fingers. "Well," he said, "this is definitely going to require some creative explanation in my mission report." The moment his hand closed around the weapon, the arena erupted in a mixture of celebration, consternation, and what sounded like several different groups placing entirely new bets on the long-term implications of interspecies warrior bonding. "Welcome to the Thalarian clans, Marcus Kane," Swaixera said, and her smile contained enough warmth to power a small space station. The bonding ceremony, Marcus discovered, made the ritual combat look like a relaxing afternoon picnic. It took place at dawn in the clan's ancestral shrine, a crystalline structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime and definitely outside his comfort zone. The building hummed with energy patterns that made his teeth ache and his neural implants register readings that shouldn't be possible according to human understanding of physics. "I feel obligated to mention," he said to Swaixera as they approached the shrine's entrance, "that my diplomatic training covered standard cultural ceremonies, but nothing involving quantum neural interface protocols. The bonding process is not typically performed with aliens," Swaixera replied, her ceremonial armor catching the dawn light in ways that defied several laws of optics. "The clan elders have been consulting archives that haven't been accessed in centuries." "That's reassuring," Marcus said, watching as ancient Thalarian text scrolled across crystalline walls and patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Should I be concerned that we're essentially improvising a sacred ritual?" "Only if you're uncomfortable with the possibility of accidentally creating new religious traditions," Swaixera said with what Marcus was learning to recognize as her particular brand of understated humor. The shrine's interior was filled with clan elders whose combined age probably exceeded the founding date of most human colonies. They regarded Marcus with expressions that ranged from curiosity to skepticism to what appeared to be scientific fascination at the prospect of observing unprecedented biochemical interactions. "The human will undergo the traditional trials," announced Elder Velthora, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been making important decisions since before Marcus's planet had achieved spaceflight. "Modified, of course, to account for his species' biological limitations." "Biological limitations?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. "Standard bonding trials test combat endurance, pain tolerance, and the ability to maintain consciousness during quantum neural interface," Swaixera explained helpfully. "The modifications account for human neural architecture being somewhat less robust than Thalarian systems." "Somewhat less robust," Marcus repeated. "You mean my brain might not survive having alien memories downloaded directly into it?" "The probability of permanent neural damage has been reduced to approximately 12%, Elder Velthora reported with the clinical precision of someone discussing acceptable risk parameters. "Well within the margins established for cross-species consciousness sharing." Marcus looked at Swaixera, who was watching him with an expression that mixed concern with what might have been admiration for his willingness to proceed despite the obviously terrifying nature of what they were about to attempt. "The memories we share will be selective," she assured him. "Combat experiences, cultural knowledge, emotional resonance patterns. Nothing that would compromise your individual identity." "And what do you gain from this?" Marcus asked, realizing he still didn't fully understand what the bonding process would mean for her. "Access to human tactical creativity," Swaixera replied without hesitation. Your species' approach to problem-solving operates according to principles that complement our traditional methods in ways that could revolutionize clan warfare. So this is still partially a military alliance. Partially, she agreed, then added quietly, though I admit that the prospect of sharing consciousness with someone whose mind works so differently from my own is, personally intriguing. The bonding apparatus resembled a torture device designed by someone with advanced degrees in both neuroscience and sadism. Crystalline interfaces connected to neural contact points while energy fields hummed with frequencies that made Marcus's bones resonate in uncomfortable harmonics. The process begins with combat memory sharing, Elder Velthora explained, activating controls that cause the apparatus to emit sounds like a cosmic tuning fork. You will experience each other's perspective on the duel that initiated this bonding. Wonderful, Marcus said, settling into the interface chair despite every survival instinct screaming warnings about the inadvisability of allowing alien technology direct access to his brain. What could possibly go wrong? The neural link activated, and Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond his skull into spaces that definitely weren't covered by human anatomy textbooks. Suddenly, he was experiencing the duel from Swyxera's perspective, seeing himself through her eyes as she analyzed his movement patterns, tactical decisions, and what she had recognized as protective instincts that prioritized defense over aggression. Through her memories, he discovered that she had been impressed not by his combat skills, which were clearly inferior by Thalarian standards, but by his tactical adaptability and the way he had fought to minimize harm rather than maximize damage. To her, this represented a fundamental difference in warrior philosophy that challenged everything she had been taught about the nature of honorable combat. Meanwhile, his own memories flowed toward her consciousness, carrying his perspective on their fight. The admiration he had felt for her technique, the respect her skill had earned, and his growing realization that Thalarian warrior culture represented something beautiful in its dedication to perfected martial artistry. This is incredible, he gasped as the memory sharing stabilized. I can feel your tactical analysis algorithms. The way you process combat variables is like mathematical poetry. And your creative problem-solving patterns, Swyxera replied, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested the neural link was affecting her speech patterns, operate according to principles that make conventional tactics seem rigid and predictable. The process deepened, sharing not just memories but emotional resonance patterns that allowed them to understand each other's motivations on levels that transcended language barriers. Marcus experienced centuries of clan history through Swyxera's inherited knowledge. The warrior traditions that had shaped her people, the honor codes that governed their society, and the profound loneliness of a leader who had never found an equal among her own kind. In return, Swyxera gained access to human perspectives on cooperation, innovation, and the kind of tactical flexibility that had allowed humanity to survive and thrive despite being one of the youngest species in galactic civilization. The integration is proceeding beyond expected parameters, Elder Velthora observed, monitoring readings that displayed patterns Marcus couldn't interpret but somehow felt were significant. The neural compatibility is unprecedented. What does that mean? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to sense the answer through the growing connection with Swyxera's consciousness. It means, Swyxera said, her mental voice now audible in his thoughts, that our bond is becoming more than cultural tradition. We're developing actual physiological synchronization. Through the neural link, Marcus could feel her emotional state, excitement mixed with wonder at the unprecedented nature of their connection. More remarkably, he could sense her combat reflexes becoming available to his own nervous system, while his creative problem-solving patterns integrated with her tactical databases. The bonding is complete, Elder Velthora announced as the apparatus powered down, leaving Marcus and Swyxera sitting in chairs that suddenly felt much less comfortable without the neural interface to distract from their physical discomfort. Marcus stood up carefully, immediately noticing that his balance felt different, more precise, as if his inner ear had been upgraded with Thalarian spatial processing capabilities. When he looked at Swyxera, he could sense her emotional state without conscious effort, while she regarded him with eyes that held new understanding of human psychology. How do you feel? She asked, though he could sense her curiosity through their bond before she spoke. Like I've been wearing sensory blinders my entire life and someone just handed me the universe's prescription glasses, Marcus replied, marveling at his enhanced awareness of the shrine's energy patterns. Also, I can feel your nervous system. That's intimate. The bond creates permanent physiological changes, Elder Velthora explained with the satisfaction of someone whose theoretical frameworks had just been validated by unprecedented experimental results. You are no longer entirely human, Marcus Kane, while Swyxera has gained access to cognitive patterns that will make her a more formidable warrior than any in clan history. Marcus looked at Swyxera, whose consciousness he could now feel woven through his own thoughts like a song he'd always known but never heard before, and realized that his understanding of identity had just expanded in ways that would make the rest of his life an ongoing adventure in impossible possibilities. You know, he said, this is definitely going to require some creative explanation in my next performance review. 6 months after the bonding ceremony, Marcus had adapted to life among the Thalarian clans with the kind of success that made his former commanding officers either proud or deeply concerned, depending on how they felt about career officers who disappeared into alien warrior cultures and emerged as something unprecedented in human experience. The supply requisitions are getting creative, Lieutenant Torres reported during their weekly communication with Colonial Command, his voice carrying across the quantum relay with only minor distortion. Requesting advanced combat training equipment for cross-species tactical integration programs raised some eyebrows at headquarters. I'm sure it did, Marcus replied, adjusting his modified armor that now incorporated both human technology and Thalarian crystalline enhancement systems. How are they handling my personnel status classification? Currently listed as diplomatic liaison with extended cultural immersion assignment, Torres said with the tone of someone who had spent considerable time arguing with bureaucrats. Though the psych evaluation team wants to know why your neural pattern readings suggest you're somehow sharing consciousness with another being. Through their bond, Marcus could feel Swyxera's amusement at the human military's struggle to categorize their relationship within existing frameworks. She was currently leading combat training exercises that combined traditional Thalarian techniques with tactical innovations inspired by human flexibility, creating warrior forms that were revolutionizing clan military doctrine. Tell them it's complicated, Marcus suggested, watching through enhanced perception as Swyxera demonstrated a fighting technique that seamlessly blended her species' precision with human adaptability. And that the implications for interspecies cooperation are significant. Their bond had evolved beyond anything the clan elders had anticipated. Marcus could now move with Thalarian grace and speed while retaining human tactical creativity, while Swyxera had incorporated human problem-solving patterns into traditional warrior forms in ways that made her the most formidable fighter in clan history. Together, they had become something neither species had produced individually, a hybrid warrior partnership that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of combat effectiveness. Sir, Torres continued, there's been some discussion at command about whether your current assignment represents successful diplomatic integration or potential security compromise. The fact that you can now allegedly perceive multiple dimensions and coordinate movements with superhuman precision has raised questions about whether you're still human. That's a fair question, Marcus admitted, testing the edge of Stormbreaker against a practice target that registered molecular-level cuts. The answer is complicated by the fact that human and Thalarian are becoming less relevant categories when applied to our partnership. The communication was interrupted by alarms that carried the distinctive harmonics of approaching combat. Through their bond, Marcus felt Swyxera's immediate shift into battle readiness as reports came in of Clan Morthak forces approaching their territory with what appeared to be hostile intent. Duty calls, Marcus said, cutting the transmission as he moved to join Swyxera at the clan's command center. The Morthak champion Vextor has issued formal challenge, Swyxera reported, her consciousness patterns radiating the controlled excitement of a warrior anticipating worthy combat. He claims that my bond with an alien has weakened our clan's honor and made me unfit for leadership. I take it this isn't the kind of challenge that gets resolved through strongly worded diplomatic correspondence, Marcus said, checking the power levels on his modified weapons systems. Traditional combat, to the death or yield, Swyxera confirmed. But he's also demanding the right to bring a bonded partner, which means we'll be fighting as a team against their champion pair. Through their neural link, Marcus could access Swyxera's tactical databases on Clan Morthak combat techniques. Vextor was a formidable opponent whose bonded partner, Zaralyn, specialized in ranged energy weapons with precision that bordered on supernatural. So we're about to prove that human-Thalarian tactical integration is superior to traditional clan combat methods, Marcus said, feeling their shared combat algorithms begin calculating optimal engagement strategies. No pressure. The entire future of interspecies cooperation among the clans depends on our performance, Swyxera agreed cheerfully. Also, if we lose, Vextor has claimed the right to execute us both as an example to other clans considering alien partnerships. Right, Marcus said, drawing Stormbreaker and feeling its crystalline core respond to his enhanced neural patterns. Just another day at the office. The combat took place in the same arena where their relationship had begun, but this time Marcus and Swyxera entered as a bonded pair whose consciousness synchronization allowed them to fight as a single entity with 4 limbs and 2 sets of tactical processing capabilities. Vextor and Zaralyn were impressive opponents whose traditional Thalarian combat techniques had been perfected through decades of partnership. They moved with the kind of coordination that came from shared cultural background and similar neural architecture, their attacks flowing together in patterns that would have been devastating against conventional opponents. But Marcus and Swyxera weren't conventional opponents. Their bond allowed them to combine Thalarian precision with human unpredictability in ways that created tactical possibilities neither species had imagined. Marcus could anticipate Swyxera's movements before she made them, while she could access his creative problem-solving patterns in real time, allowing them to adapt their strategy as the combat evolved. They're not fighting like separate warriors, Vextor snarled as Marcus deflected his attack while Swyxera simultaneously struck from an angle that shouldn't have been physically possible. They're fighting like a single creature with multiple bodies. That's exactly what we are, Swyxera replied, her blade work incorporating human tactical variations that transformed traditional Thalarian forms into something entirely new. The final exchange lasted precisely 7 seconds and involved a combination maneuver that required Marcus to trust Swyxera's reflexes while she relied on his spatial reasoning to create an opening that existed for less than a heartbeat. When the energy fields cleared, Vextor and Zaralyn were on their knees with blade points at their throats, their expressions mixing defeat with something that might have been respect. Yield, Vextor said, his voice carrying the weight of acknowledgement. Your bond has not weakened you, Swyxera. It has made you something beyond traditional understanding. The arena erupted in celebration as the implications became clear. Not only had Marcus and Swyxera proven their partnership's effectiveness, but they had established a precedent for interspecies cooperation that would reshape clan politics for generations. The Council of Elders recognizes the tactical superiority of hybrid warrior partnerships, Elder Velthora announced, her ancient voice carrying across the arena with formal authority. Clan alliances with human fighters are hereby approved for those warriors who demonstrate compatible neural patterns. Through their bond, Marcus felt Swyxera's profound satisfaction mixed with affection that had grown far beyond mere tactical partnership. Their relationship had evolved into something that transcended species boundaries, a connection that combined the best aspects of both civilizations while creating possibilities neither had imagined alone. So, Marcus said as they left the arena together, Stormbreaker humming with contentment at his side, what do we do now that we've revolutionized interspecies military cooperation and probably started a new chapter in galactic diplomatic history? Now, Swyxera replied, her consciousness patterns dancing through his thoughts with warmth that felt like coming home, we explore what other impossible things become possible when 2 different kinds of warriors choose to become something greater together. Marcus activated his communication link to Colonial Command, knowing that his next report would require language that didn't exist yet to describe what they had accomplished. Torres, this is Kane. I need you to open a new file classification, Successful Interspecies Warrior Bonding with Implications for Revolutionary Military Cooperation Frameworks. Sir, Torres's voice carried notes of resignation mixed with professional pride. At this point, I'm just going to create a separate filing system for your reports. The standard categories stopped being adequate months ago. Probably wise, Marcus agreed, watching as young Thalarian warriors began training with human partners in techniques that combined the best of both species' approaches to combat. Also, you can update my personnel status from diplomatic liaison to cultural bridge with permanent assignment. Permanent, sir. Marcus looked at Swaxera, whose presence in his consciousness felt as natural as breathing, and realized that the question of returning to purely human existence had become meaningless. He had found something among the stars that humanity was only beginning to understand, a bond that transcended species, culture, and individual identity to create something entirely new. Permanent, he confirmed. I'm exactly where I belong. Through their shared awareness, he felt Swaxera's agreement resonate like a harmony that would continue for the rest of their lives. They had begun as enemies in ritual combat and become partners in a relationship that was redefining what it meant to be warrior, diplomat, and something altogether unprecedented in galactic civilization. Besides, Marcus added, grinning at the thought of trying to explain quantum consciousness bonding to his former commanding officers, someone needs to write the manual for human-alien warrior partnerships. And I suspect that's going to be a very interesting assignment. As the twin sons of Nexus 7 set behind the clan territories, Marcus Kane, no longer entirely human but not quite alien either, walked beside Swaxera toward a future that would be built on the foundation of impossible becoming inevitable, one consciousness-bonded warrior partnership at a time.